The solution here is to clear the way by sacrificing the blocking traitorous piece. In this video, we'll talk about a chess tactic called clearance sacrifice. Clearance sacrifice is when you sacrifice a piece in order to get it out of the way. Then another piece of yours can get its way to give you the win. In this position, white notices that if the e6 square is vacant, that could have been a fork with knight to e6, forking the king and the queen. If it wasn't for his queen on e6 that is present there, that could have given him material advantage. If he moves his queen somewhere, for example, to queen h3, then black may be able to discern that and can prevent it by, for example, playing queen to f5. Now white needs a less obvious and more aggressive move. Then there is queen takes g8, sacrificing the queen away and taking it back later with an extra material. Because after rook takes g8, we have knight e6 check, king to d7, knight takes c5 check, and bishop takes knight. Now, what happens here? It turns out to be gaining the opponent's queen and rook in exchange for queen and knight. Now that is a favorable deal by clearance sacrifice. From now on, if you think that something is impossible because one of your own pieces is in the way, cheer up and look for a clearance sacrifice, and you'll be glad you did. Here, black sees an opportunity of potential checkmate if his queen can get into h3, because he's got a very strong diagonal control here on a dark square bishop. But his other bishop on f5 is in the way. Timely enough, he can use a clearance sacrifice by putting a threat to a high value piece standing on a light square. Bishop to c2. A tempo to attack the queen, and at the same time, a checkmate on h3 by giving way for his queen to cross in there. Now, white must give up his queen to prevent checkmate, and that will be hopeless for him to continue the game. In this position, white appears to be in trouble. His queen on g3 is under attack, and his f5 knight is hanging in two different ways. Is it time for white to panic? Well, the answer is no if white notices that there is a queen g7 potential checkmate if it wasn't for the rook in there. Now the question is, how can you get the rook away from g7 without giving black time to recover? Obviously, a rook to g8 rather is not working here because of rook takes g8, right? Rook to e7 doesn't work either because obviously in the first place the queen is hanging and still not good. White has to find something sharp and shocking. The answer? Rook h7, clearing the g7 square for the white queen with gain of time. Because after the force king takes rook, we have queen g7 checkmate. Clearance sacrifice is not just about minor and major pieces clearing the way. Many times, pawns block the way for a material win. Here is an example where white wishes his pawn on f5 wasn't there, because if knight occupies that square, then it could have been a fork on king and rook, right? Now, thanks to clearance sacrifice f6, attacking the e7 bishop and clearing the way for a winning fork. After bishop takes f6 or g takes f6, knight f5 check is a free meal for white. That will be a huge material advantage. In this next position, white played knight to e5 here with threat on capturing the pawn on f7. In time, black castled here, kingside. Little did he know that there's another plan that's hidden and deadly. Then white strikes, bishop takes f7 still. Now the idea is that white notices that his opponent's queen on the queen side here lacks some space, and that placing a knight on c4 would trap it. That's the very reason he gives away his bishop on c4, a sacrifice on f7 to let his knight occupy its square. Because after rook takes f7, knight c4, and the queen is trapped. White wins the game. Perhaps you've been familiarized with the clear and sacrifice now, and how these sacrifices work. Now, let us test if you're sensitive enough to spot some clearance tactics. In this first test, Black has managed to squeak and pass her in e3. But still, it's very difficult to let it progress further and promote, right? And White can just play f4 there to really cut this support from the h6 bishop. He can also play queen e2 and d4 push there to solidify his position. But instead, White played a greedy move, rook takes a7, thinking he got himself an extra pawn. If you're Black, can you punish White's carelessness here? You can pause the video and try find the best move for Black. Alright, thank you for your answers. Congratulations if you saw the move e2. Now, well, rook takes a7, rook takes a7, e2 is still the same thing and would lead to the same advantage for Black. Okay, so let's proceed with e2. After rook takes a7, e2. Now, if queen takes e2, then we have a queen exchange here. Queen takes queen, bishop takes queen, and we have bishop to e3, check king g2, and I'm going to capture this rook on a7, and that will be a big plus for Black. If after e2 bishop captures, obviously still the same, bishop e3 check, and we'll get this rook there. Queen e3 also works because after king g2 we can just capture these rooks there, and still the same material advantage for Black. Now I have another thing to show here, because after rook takes a7, if after e2, okay, White will play rook takes a8. Obviously he loses his queen by e takes d1 queen. After rook takes d8 check, queen takes rook, rook takes d1, and we have queen to f6, and one of these pawns is going to fall. Still material advantage for Black, and that will be overwhelming for White to really defend.
Hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.